to share their wisdom with you all. Please make them feel welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. So good afternoon. I think if you're still here at this point, you get the gold star for commitment to wellbeing in your workplaces. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Dr. Michelle McQuaid, and I just want to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting today, and to pay my respect to their elders past and present, and to extend that respect to any other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people here that we have today. And it is my great privilege and pleasure to help host this conversation with our amazing guests who have asked to introduce themselves. So Kate, I might pass to you so you can let everybody know.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm Kate Hillman. I have a ridiculously long title. I'm called the People, Place and Culture Leader for EY, and it's a privilege to be here today. Thank you so much.
And I'm Sharon Gray. I'm the Head of People and Culture at OzHarvest. I have 2 dogs, 2 daughters and a husband, and I love them in that order. And I'm really happy to be joining these ladies today.
So Kate and Sharon, it's quite the mouthful, the topic today, around empowering and enabling leaders to develop a culture of psychological safety. Rolls off the tongue nice and easily. And so I think it might help as we dive in just to, in its simplest form, what on earth does that really mean, and why does it matter to workplaces at this time? When I think about psychological safety, and I was lucky recently to interview Dr. Amy Edmondson from Harvard, who's one of the leaders in this space, I came away from that conversation with her with an understanding that really when we talk about psychological safety, we're talking about a shared belief that talking openly and honestly with each other is valued. And she really spoke to us in that about the cost of staying silent often is very low in most situations, but the cost of speaking up openly and honestly carries a lot of risk with it. You know, will somebody think I'm saying something strange? Will it be embarrassing? Might I get pushback? Might they think less of me? And so she talked about this calculus between silence and speaking up. And so how as workplaces do we make it feel more valued to actually have our voices heard? We've recently just measured psychological safety with 1,000 workers around Australia, and we were really finding in there that for a lot of us, unfortunately, we don't always feel psychologically safe at work. Only about 18.6% of all of the workers in that study said, yeah, I feel like having open and honest conversations is valued. So we know from both our research and Amy and others that psychological safety has all sorts of benefits if we can help people feel able to do that in terms of performance, in terms of well-being, and we've also seen it recently helping to minimise every single one of the psychosocial safety risks that we might have in workplaces. But Kate, why at EY is psychological safety one of the things on your priority list?
It's so important because the work that we do is knowledge work. And we often talk about the cognitive load, so the pressure on our people's brains. And when you're filtering because you're nervous about people accepting who you are or what you might say, you're adding to that cognitive load all the time. And our people's brains are the machines of our business, put it quite crudely. And so making sure that people feel safe and well means their brains operate the most effectively, and we're going to have the best work that we can get from them. But I think quite simply, we all know what it's like to go to work and be fearful of being shamed or humiliated, and we're never going to get a good result when we do that, and we don't encourage diversity when we do that, and we know that diversity has massive dividends. So I think it's how do we move towards being able to understand each other and give leaders the skills in their own hands to be curious, gently curious with people, and inquiring, and leaders needing to be empathetic. We know that we'll get the most out of our people when we focus on those things.
I think when you explain it that way, neurologically, biologically, it adds such sense to why this matters in our workplaces. It's hard to do great work if all the time am I safe, am I not safe? And we think about what that just does physiologically of sending the blood out to our arms and legs for fight, flight or freeze versus up to the thinking part of our brain. The business case on it would seem reasonably simple in that instance.
It really is. For me, we see the dividend in it, and I think that the reality is there's the science and the data behind it. It's absolutely empirical, but we all know, we've all experienced what it's like.
Yeah.
If you're anxious, if you're second guessing yourself, and the loss of the voices that we hear and the different perspectives and understanding is a huge lost opportunity to business as well. So there's the measurable in how we perform, and then there's the reality of you don't even know what opportunities you're missing out on if you're not listening to those diverse voices.
And the impact on learning, right, as well in the process of that.
Absolutely.
Sharon, what about at OzHarvest? Why is psychological safety something you're investing in?
Well, I think we've been talking about it for 2 days now, haven't we, about how important psychological safety is. So OzHarvest has actually set it as a strategic goal to have a workplace that is a great place where people feel that they can bring their whole selves to work and do great work. So
that was an important point you were making.
Important point, yeah. So, for us, we do a great deal of work around role modelling, vulnerability and authenticity and gratitude so that people can feel really comfortable about being themselves and being able to speak up and speak out and not be fearful of that. And we're really mindful that when you cultivate a place of work like that for your workforce, and our workforce is 300 employees and 3,000 volunteers, and our workforce is a force for good and for change, and they do great work, for vulnerable people, and sadly for our vulnerable planet as well, the work we do. So the work we do is important, and the people we have in our teams are important. So that's why we've committed to that so strongly.
I love that.
You touched on the vulnerability that's needed, right, to be able to speak up and to talk openly and honestly, to ask the silly questions, to suggest the bit out there ideas, to ask for feedback, to give feedback, to say, hey, actually I don't think that is okay in the way that we're doing things. And vulnerability logically makes sense to all the benefits. Brain's safer, we're being able to learn and work together, grow together. But in practice, of course, vulnerability, especially at work where our financial security is dependent on keeping our jobs, can feel like such a big ask. So for both of you, I'm curious as to what practically you're doing in your workplaces, both for leaders and for your people and your culture, to help cultivate psychological safety. Again, in the research we just completed with Australian workers, there was very much a clear sense that if we don't have psychological safety at the me level, it's hard to give what I don't have to others, particularly as a leader. If we don't have it in our teams, that this is an okay way to talk to each other in our team, it will be valued and appreciated and respected. And in our workplace culture as a whole, if it's not okay to speak up, actually, and often we find it's not that workplaces are trying to keep their people silent, but sometimes part of belonging in our workplace is we're all so nice and we all get along around here, so we don't want to rock the boat. And so what can look like a healthy culture from the outside is actually often undermining the very thing we need for psychological safety. So, Kate, at EY, how are you dealing with some of that system's ability to build psychological safety?
Yeah, it's such an important point, and I think we talk about kindness with candour.
Nice,
It's not kind not to tell someone that they need to develop in a certain area. You're not helping them with their career. So how do we develop that kindness with candour? We do a lot of work. We talk about better me, better you, better us. So starting with self, as you say, working with others, and then thinking about ourselves as a system. This is a deeply human thing. And, we're in the world of AI at the moment, and we're all talking about automation. But the reality is this is our interaction as human beings. So we spend a lot of time with our partners as leaders in trying to develop the skills around empathy. We talk about gentle curiosity. How do you lean in gently with people to get to know them and understand them better? You really can't divest yourself of those leadership responsibilities, and I think our focus is on developing those, what we'd say, transformative leadership skills, other than just the technical skills. We have very capable people, very strong skills, but how do you bring that other order of skills? And we were chatting earlier, some colleagues and I was saying, it's very hard to transform anything if you haven't had your own transformative journey. So untransformed people really struggle with transformation. So I genuinely think the work is for us as human beings to have those real conversations, to experience that vulnerability, and then to make sure that you are modelling that. I'm very good at modelling that I don't have all the answers, and I'm very good at modelling being wrong. So that works quite well for my people.
Takes a lot of pressure off, doesn't it?
It is the truth, actually, and I think that's the thing. How do we have these safe places where we learn together, but we speak our truth to one another, but kindly? Your point, how many times have you gone into a performance management conversation and you see that the fear in that person you're talking to, and they've already left the building. They're already trying to work out, where am I going to send my kids to school? How am I going to pay my mortgage? So our skill set is in keeping people safe while we help them understand the things that they need to hear. So we often talk about empathy. I think the missing word is often compassion.
I agree.
I think we can't always relate to what someone else is feeling, but we must always begin with compassion. And we have some very open conversations. And another point I would make is we have some very strong technical support. So we have a Chief Mental Health Officer, John O'Nicholas, who's a clinical psychologist, helps us with the way we design these things as well, because we also know that the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Absolutely.
So we need to make sure that we're properly informed by the science as we move forward.
Absolutely. And I love your gentle curiosity there. I think, we know our minds naturally, to try to keep us safe, we tend to leap to assumptions and judgments. Am I okay with this person? What are they thinking and feeling? What might they do next? And before we know it, we've sucked psychological safety out of the interaction. We've lost that willingness for kind candour because we're busy getting stuck on the hump of politeness, or we're biting our tongue and fixing it for them, or we're blaming and shaming. And I think we often forget that all these things, these little everyday, very human behaviours we're all prone to, undermine psychological safety as soon as we're in there, and it takes so much to build it back up. Does that resonate?
Absolutely, it totally does. And I think when I think about my industry and myself, we are consultants. We spend our time telling other people the answers. And so I think a lot of people in my sector feel anxious about not having an answer and to lead with questions.
What are we paying you for?
That's right. So how can we be vulnerable and be okay with not understanding and not knowing, and create an example of how you can do that gracefully?
Yeah, beautiful. Sharon, what about at OzHarvest, when you think about trying to realise that priority of psychological safety, at that we often say the me, the individual, the we, leader and team, and us, the system lens, so me, we and us. What are some of the things you're finding works well?
Well, I love listening to Kate, because I'll build on what you're talking about around, it's all around conversations. And we often, the one thing that we say at OzHarvest is, have you talked to them?
Yeah.
So have you talked to them? And that's really simply it. We've got some practical things and supports that we give our leaders to do that. We've got a process that we call continuous conversations. There's no really rule about how continuous it has to be, but it's just about the person. So it's at the individual, and then their responsibilities, and then their development. So it's checking in with that person all of the time to see how they're going and how they're tracking against all of the pieces that make up their life and are really important for them. We've got a saying at OzHarvest as well. So we know that to be innovative and to learn a lot, that you have to fail a lot. And so we have the saying that we like to flern, which is failing and learning. So we flern a lot, and it allows us that safe understanding, and we also share our tales of fail is another one. So we share our tales of failure. And that really helps people understand that it's okay to make mistakes, but from those mistakes you really grow. So it allows us to fail fast, fail often, but learn quickly and improve a lot. So yeah, there's some of the things that we do. We're starting to really build on that leadership support at the moment. I've heard a really key thing through these last 2 days about the support that leaders need at the moment. So we've got a leadership program now around all of those skills that you were talking about, that leaders need to be able to support not only themselves, but the teams that they have, and then the organisation more broadly.
Yeah, I think that's so important. In the study we've just done, we found almost 2/3 of Australian workers were saying they felt burnt out and had been feeling that way for some time. When we split that between leaders and team members, it was around 68% of leaders and 54% of team members. So neither number is good. But I think normally we see that reversed, where because leaders have a bit more autonomy and influence, they're not as burned out. But I think it's important not to underestimate right now the need for psychological safety for our leaders in our workplaces, And how do we make it okay for them to talk about what was the mistakes,
Tales of
the
failing
tales of
and
failing.
flirning.
Flirning, that was it. They're flirning, because I think the more we can normalise leaders being able to your point about if we've not transformed, it's hard to help other people transform. Is so critical now. And I think the last thing I'd just note on that too is, again, we've talked a lot at this conference about psychosocial risks and all the new responsibilities we have. A lot of that's getting put onto leaders because they are the day-to-day contact. And so again, how do we use psychological safety and building the skills, the gentle curiosity, the kind candour and the like, to make it okay to talk with each other about what isn't working more at that team level. And again, we definitely saw in this language where psychological safety was high, the frequency of experiencing the psychosocial risks was significantly lower for 15 different psychosocial hazards that leaders are now being asked to help manage. So really important. If you're after that research, there's little cards on your chairs. Huge thanks to the Workplace Wellness Festival, Ari and Minta Allison for their work on that. Kate, thank you so much for your wisdom.
Pleasure.
Sharon, thank you so much. I love
Thank
the
you.
practical examples, and in addition to the beautiful work that you're doing at OzHarvest.
Thank you.
We will be around a little bit. Oh, actually, we've got 2 minutes. Is there anything else that we did so well? Look at us go. Anything,
we?
Kate,
We were
you
so
want to
conscious
add?
of keeping
I know, we were
time.
like, oh my God.
I do think that piece around leadership and empathy is really important, in that it is a new skill for a lot of leaders. And how do we help them on that journey and not make those assumptions? And how do we reward for those skill sets? So I think in a lot of businesses, we're very focused on hard metrics,
Yes.
financial metrics, hours metrics. How do we make sure that people are recognised and rewarded for their skill with their people? Because we manage to what people inspect rather than expect, unfortunately. So I think there's a real opportunity to redesign a lot of the measures in businesses to drive this agenda as well, and to recognise and reward the hard work that leaders put in.
Yeah, definitely. And Sharon, you talked about sort of thinking about that leader support, a little more of what's next on your journey at OzHarvest. What's top of mind for you as you try to think about how to give leaders some of those skills that Kate's tapping into?
Yeah. So like we're obviously doing the program, but I think we can't underestimate the importance of peer support through this. So coaching each other, buddying up with each other, leaning on each other when you've got a difficult situation that you need to work your way through. I think that's really important. Never underestimate that. Might be putting ourselves out of business here, the HR team, but I think you often find the answers from people, your colleagues, that have been through a similar situation.
Yeah,
We're better together.
Better together.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of benefit in leader triads of 3 leaders, sort of peers together, to your point, and giving them very simple questions that can guide that, check in with each other around what's working well so they can celebrate the strengths, feel a bit safe with each other. Where are we struggling to normalise? We're all struggling some of the time, it's okay. What are we learning so that they're getting into what do we do with this? And then how will we adapt? And we're finding even just helping 3 leaders come together once a month and just have that conversation does 2 things. One, it creates some psychological safety for them to see no other leader has it all figured out either. It's okay. We're all still here and got our jobs. But it also helps give leaders some of the skills and questions to take back and try with their teams as well. Because often we find there's great intent. Nobody's arguing about wanting to have more psychological safety with each other. But the practice and the confidence to do it is often the biggest stumbling.
That's it, the how
Yeah.
and the focus, the intentionality.
Yeah. Thank you both so
Thank
much
you.
for your time and sharing. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.